almost busted in Laredo, but for reasons that I'd rather not disclose.
I smoke pot, and I like it a lot. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer to use than alcohol. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting responsible marijuana smokers in America. And to learn what you can do to help, please contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORML.
The show was long and we were just sitting there, and we'd come to play and not just for the ride.
And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, normalaudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back here to the Audio Stash today. It is Tuesday, December 4th. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us here today. Help us end marijuana prohibition in America. Just visit norml.org to make your donation or join NORML today. You can make a big difference today. Just visit norml.org to find out how. We've got a great audio stash for you today. A big moment happened in Colorado yesterday in Fort Collins when sheriffs handed back medical marijuana seized from two patients there. We'll speak with their attorney and the patients themselves, James and Lisa Masters, here on the Audio Stash today. Also in the program today, we'll speak with Aaron Houston, the Director of Government Relations at the Marijuana Policy Project, looking ahead at the reform efforts in 2008. So a big program today. Let's get things started with a quick review of this case in Colorado. Our news today, police return marijuana to medical patients in Colorado. Yesterday, James and Lisa Masters had usable marijuana, cultivation equipment, and marijuana plants returned to them by county sheriffs. The items were seized in August 2006. 39 live plants were confiscated at the time, but they were returned dead yesterday. The Masters may seek monetary compensation for the dead plants and other items damaged in police custody. It is the first time that marijuana has been returned to medical patients in Colorado. The state is home to one of the dozen medical marijuana programs across the country and has patients involved with the program from around the state. Joining us today to discuss this very interesting case and tell us firsthand about the return of the property yesterday are one of the attorneys in the case, Brian Vicente, and the Masters themselves. James and Lisa will join us today via phone from Fort Collins, Colorado. Let's begin with attorney Brian Vicente. Brian, welcome here to the Audio Stash today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Great to speak with you today, Brian. Now, tell us about the background of this case that resulted here in county sheriffs handing marijuana back to the Masters this yesterday.
It dates back to August 2006 when the Child Services came to James and Lisa Masters' house. They're a couple, medical marijuana individuals in Fort Collins, Colorado. Child Services always comes with a police officer. At that time, the police officer noticed medical marijuana. The Masters said, "Oh yes, we are medical marijuana patients. We use this for debilitating conditions. We also provide it to other sick people." And at that point, they called in the big dogs, and a number of police showed up and confiscated all the medical marijuana.
Now, tell us a little bit about the medical program there in Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado has a medical marijuana program stemming back to 2000. It was passed that year by voter initiative. It allows people with serious debilitating conditions, cancer, AIDS, glaucoma, chronic pain, chronic nausea, to get a doctor's recommendation, which they can then give over to the state. The state will issue them a ID card allowing them to possess and cultivate medical marijuana within certain limits.
And James and Lisa, they were not part of the program at the time of their arrest in 2006.
No, that's the interesting. There's a lot of interesting things about this case. They were not licensed at the time. They had been told by doctors that they needed to use medical marijuana, or they should use it for their debilitating medical conditions, but they had not gone through the process of becoming licensed. And so that was an issue at the beginning of the case. A quick chronology is about a year after this case was brought, we were able to get all the charges dismissed, all the criminal charges. They were facing a number of felonies because the search was actually illegal. The warrant was got in sort of a scandalous manner by the police, and so the judge tossed out all the criminal charges. At that point, over the summer, we pushed for return of property for all the plants, the 39 marijuana plants, to about 8 ounces of loose marijuana, and the thousands of dollars worth of growing equipment. And after about 6 months of wrangling on that in the courtroom, we were able to show through patient testimony that the Masters were indeed caring for sick individuals and providing them with significant care at the time of the bust. So even though they weren't licensed by the state, they were fulfilling the definition of a caregiver under Colorado law, because they were providing significant care, driving these people to doctor's appointments, giving them medical marijuana when they're in need, and so forth. So because of that, they were allowed legally to have medical marijuana at the time of the bust a year and a half ago, and therefore the judge ordered a full return of property.
So when you talk about the full return of property, the sheriffs there, they held on to the marijuana since last year.
Yeah, that's correct. The police had seized 39 plants, 8 ounces, all that marijuana back in August 2006, and had been holding it since that time. We, had been asking them to get it back for quite a while, and finally the judge did order that full return, and this morning we went and picked it up from the Fort Collins police. And
let me ask what the police response was during the turnover.
Well, they didn't seem too happy. However, the issue is, and I brought this up to the judge, I mean, these plants were seized. They were alive, and they were seized 16 months ago. And I told the judge, I think there's a good chance these are dead or damaged at this point. They've been in police custody for over a year. And Colorado's law actually requires the police or law enforcement entities to upkeep medical marijuana plants when they're seized. It's kind of a not very well-known provision of law that we've been trying to get the police to act upon up here. And in this case, the plant, the Masters had claimed these are medical marijuana plants from the first second the police arrived. So the police, under Colorado law, should have been taking care of the plants. They weren't, so they broke the law. And we found that out this morning when we went to the police station to get these plants back via the judge's order. They were all dead. Many were moldy. Some of the marijuana was actually missing. So it was all, it was all very, although we were happy to have the first marijuana plant, first marijuana plants returned in Colorado history and perhaps nationally, the plants themselves were dead. So we are going to take legal action and move for some monetary compensation for their destroyed property.
And Brian, what kind of legal precedent does this case set for medical marijuana patients in Colorado? And could it be precedent for patients in other states as well?
I think it does. It does set precedent in Colorado. This is a trial court decision, so it's not necessarily legally binding on other courts. However, it is persuasive, and it got a ton of press. There's an Associated Press piece that's going to be running later today, so it's going to get national press. And I think it, it shows that the medical marijuana law, it was written by the people of Colorado to help Coloradans. If something in there says that the police need to maintain medical marijuana plants and give them back to sick people as appropriate, then that letter of the law should be followed. I mean, it's simply not too much for us to ask the police in this state to follow the law, and that's all we're doing in this case. So I'm hoping it'll send a strong message to law enforcement entities around the state that they should not simply confiscate medical marijuana plants, and if they do, then they should upkeep them. In terms of the national repercussions, as far as I know, this is the first time marijuana plants have been handed over to their owners. So I think it could help set a bar for similar actions in other states and California and the states where there are many, many more medical marijuana patients. Hopefully, it can lead to better, safe access for those individuals.
Now, Brian, having seen this case through the last year, was this the outcome expected? I mean, last year, did you think that it was a given that the marijuana could be returned by the sheriffs?
No. I mean, this was part of, I think, our larger philosophy to try to, really push the envelope and make the medical marijuana law stand for something that helps patients. Plants and medical marijuana are rarely returned, if ever, in Colorado and nationally. So I think we didn't have an expectation that the plants would be handed back over. However, we certainly had that hope, and we continued to push for it, and we continued to ask for return of property and for them to drop the charges. And we cited the Colorado Constitution over and over again, and it's simply unambiguous in this area that plants can't be harmed. So, I think just continuing to push has really led to a positive outcome.
Well, Brian, many thanks again for joining us here today to discuss this fascinating case. We're going to speak with James and Lisa here coming up next. But, Brian, many thanks for joining us today, and a big congratulations.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you again, Brian. Brian Vicente represented the Masters in this case in Colorado. He's a member of the NORML Legal Committee and part of Sensible Colorado. We have links to Sensible Colorado right up on our website at normalaudiostash.com. The Masters are joining us today by phone from Fort Collins, Colorado, to discuss this fascinating return of property. Again, yesterday they received their marijuana back from the county sheriffs after the search used to seize it was ruled illegal. First, we'll speak with James Masters. James, welcome here to the program.
Well, thank you.
Thanks again for joining us here today, James. First, what was this experience like for you to receive your property back yesterday?
Well, first off, I want to say before anything else that I want to thank groups like NORML and Sensible and attorneys like Robert Corey and Brian Vicente. They are just incredible people and incredibly outstanding in their field. So, thanks to them. And then as far as the way it felt, it was definitely, it was a huge victory. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But also, I really wish that they would have followed the constitutional law, which I was well within by having a doctor's recommendation.
And was any of the cultivation equipment damaged when you received it back?
It looks like it had been tossed around, but it's all functional. There's definitely some stress points where the transformer maybe had impacted and kind of dented. In all, it all worked. It was the medicine that was in the, worse shape, and some of the paraphernalia. And
James, was the medicine returned actually usable?
None of the medicine is really still usable. I mean, there was approximately, less than 20 grams that was deemed usable. The rest of it was in evidence bags that it had, God knows what spilled on them. One of the evidence bags with the plants that were in cultivation that they dried, they had put broken glass paraphernalia in. So, I don't know how much of that was intentional. I can't really speculate as to that, but it was definitely not treated well. Certainly not living.
Now, what has this case meant to you? It's been over a year now of this legal fight.
My kids could look at me in two ways. if I hadn't pursued this, and this is what's most important to me, was that my children could have seen me, A, as somebody who is for cultivating marijuana, and thus has to work at Burger King for the rest of his life, or they could see me as a freedom fighter, as somebody who did pay attention in civics class, in addition to other classes, obviously, valued their education and used that to the best of their ability to get through. So I think that this is ultimately worth it, not just to the medical marijuana community, but to our family as well.
Righto.
And the marijuana community in general. So
let me also ask about the medical marijuana community in Colorado, James. Is it growing now that the law has been in effect for some time?
Well, people are still somewhat standoffish. They don't want to get on the state database. That's not necessary in some of the other medical states, but here in Colorado, it's definitely going to be. It's not necessary here in Colorado, but it's to your benefit to have that red card, and they don't realize the implications of trying to prove an affirmative defense. Lots of money, lots of hardship, and lots of time. So you got to be mindful of what the state is actually offering you, what your people in your community and your state have decided to keep you safe because you're a marijuana user, a medical marijuana user more specifically. But that's huge.
And finally today, let me ask what the future has in store for you now that this case has been resolved.
Well, the day we got out of jail, we actually had a meeting, one of our community meetings, and it was scheduled. And 2 hours after we were released, we were at that meeting. So nothing has really changed. If anything, we've become stronger through this, and our future is definitely in activism and community organization. In addition to that, I see a lot of, you hear about the DEA raids, and you hear about being outside the realm of reasonable compensation. And I know that these places generate revenue. And that being said, I have a vision for our community, for healthcare in Larimer County that maybe we can contribute to prescription assistance and people under the age of 18 who don't have insurance, rather than line our pockets. So I really think that if we can bring this out and prove what this revenue can do and what kind of stand-up people cannabis users are, then we can move away from the guy on the couch stigma. The fact that we're on the couch is pretty much because that's the only place that we can use it. So there's a lot to be said for folks who have used cannabis. I know professors and lawyers, police officers, doctors who use cannabis, and they all do it undercover, and it doesn't really benefit us as a whole. We look like a bunch of slack-jaw stoners, so because these folks aren't coming out and voicing their opinions about cannabis and how it helps them get through their daily lives, and why they're not stuck in a bottle. So why do they just is enjoyment not enough? Does it have to be medical? That's a real legitimate question. Obviously it benefits me profoundly on a medicinal level, but I think that there's a lot to be said for the calmness it provides the average person.
Indeed. Well, James, this has been a wonderful conversation here today. Many thanks for speaking with us here on the Audio Stash.
Tell everybody at NORML we say thank you so much. Keith and Alan and all of you guys have been an inspiration to us throughout our lives, so thank you.
Many thanks again, James. James Masters, who just received his medical marijuana back yesterday from county sheriffs in Colorado there. Also joining us today is Lisa Masters. Lisa, thank you for joining us here today as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Lisa. Now, let me ask what it felt like for you to receive the marijuana back yesterday from the county sheriffs there.
That was amazing. It was, seriously, it's very surreal, to tell you the truth. I mean, I never really thought that anything like this could happen, and I think that it's a major victory for people who smoke marijuana everywhere, not just medical marijuana.
And tell us a little bit about the Fort Collins area. Is it a spread out community or is it tight knit?
I'd say both. I mean, all the little communities within the community are very tight knit, but they don't tend to share very much with each other, if you know what I mean. There's many people who are not very liberal, and there's many people who are very liberal, and some are right on the fence.
Now, James just mentioned your kids and how they view you and how this case moved forward. It was a long and difficult case. You're both well known for being dedicated parents. Has the high-profile nature of this case made it tough sometimes?
It's very hard. People look at us differently. They look at my children differently. Our kids don't get invited over to people's houses or to parties and so on and so forth because, I think that the parents think that I'm going to bring marijuana with me, or they're afraid to come to our house because there's going to be marijuana everywhere. And that's not the case. I mean, the case is that we, keep it away from our children. They know what we do. We've always been honest with them, and they're very proud of us, I think, even though it affects them in a somewhat negative manner. I think that, they keep saying that they want to be lawyers like Rob Corey and Brian Vicente, so they can help people like us, So, in many ways it's been negative, and in many ways it's been positive.
And how have your families responded to everything that's happened?
Our immediate families have been extremely supportive. Both parents and siblings on both sides have, they're a little blown away. But, and none of them smoke marijuana either, but they've been extremely supportive, just like they have been throughout our entire lives. And, and there's some questions, and I think some of our family doesn't know what's going on. They've been kind of kept in the dark. But, as far as our immediate families, they've been extremely supportive. They've helped us out through everything. They've helped pay our legal bills and all the drug tests that we've gone through and so on and so forth.
And Lisa, let me ask, has this outcome with the police returning your property yesterday, has this strengthened your position within the community there as you move forward in the state medical cannabis program?
It really, really has, because, people who do this type of thing are usually viewed with a negative stigma. And now that they see us out there and speaking and talking to people and teaching our patients, how to do things and give them resources and such.
James mentioned that even on the day of your release, there was one of your information meetings. Is that how you're usually interacting with the public on the issue of marijuana, is through those meetings?
Yes, at the very beginning, we started doing these meetings probably about 4 to 5 months before we got arrested. And usually they were about once a week, and they were about 2 hours long, and it would be general information, national news, so on and so forth. And people have a lot of questions, even if it's not about being a patient or wanting to become a patient or how it all works, they're curious about things, and I think it was good for them to be able to come out and ask those questions and not be told that what they were asking is wrong, or this shouldn't be asked in a public area, because it's information, and knowledge is everything. And we had to, we've been doing these meetings for well over a year and a half. We had to stop for a short period because we had opened a new dispensary and getting that all set up and such like that. But now we're back doing the meetings again once a week for about 2 hours a day, or 2 hours each meeting. And, people really enjoy, like I said, being able to get that information. Because, some of them, we have people who come here that don't even smoke marijuana, that just are curious about, what it does and how it affects you and, the laws on marijuana and so forth.
All righto. Well, Lisa, thank you again. Big congratulations to you and James and to the legal staff there. Many thanks again for joining us here today, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Many thanks again, Lisa. Lisa Masters in Fort Collins, Colorado. She and her husband, James, received their marijuana, some dead marijuana plants and some cultivation equipment back from the county sheriffs in Fort Collins, Colorado. More information about the case is available at Sensible Colorado. We have links to it at normalaudiostash.com.
There's a flowering spade growing out of his chest, full of magic and healing. She is a flowering spade. As she moves and she sways, you can see that she feels it. She's off to dance with the goat boys. He's off to sail through your wide open ocean. She learned to sing from a siren. He learned to swim from a drop in the water. There are words, there are signs. Close your eyes, there is magic inside you. Hey, the sparks in your mind, building frames for to trace your desires. She learned to cook from a sailor. He learned to cry in an elephant circus. She found a recipe for flying. He's growing flowers to understand, I am rejoice. Na 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 na.
You're listening to Pod Safe Music on NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
Tuesday Government at Work segment today. We're going to look ahead at some reform efforts for 2008. Joining us today is the Director of Government Relations at the Marijuana Policy Project, Aaron Houston. Aaron, welcome back here to the Audio Stash today.
It is always an honor to be with you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again for joining us today, Aaron. 2008 is shaping up to be a hot year for marijuana law reform. What's caught your eye for future developments next year?
Well, what's catching my eye at this point is that this is becoming, medical marijuana in particular, is becoming an issue that more candidates and public officials are rallying around. And you see this in the change and the difference between the Democratic field running for president in 2004 as compared with the Democratic field running for president right now in 2008. Essentially at this point, this is a party line issue for the presidential candidates because all of the Democratic presidential candidates are supportive of ending the raids on seriously ill people and their caregivers. And all of the Republicans, all of the mainstream Republicans, I should say all of the leading candidates in the Republican Party are against the idea of this, although there are a few people that stand out. Great leaders like Ron Paul, for example, who has been very consistent in this fight protecting seriously ill people, and Tom Tancredo as well. But we see this now becoming more of a mainstream issue in the political realm, and it's great to see that.
That question of decriminalization asked of the Democrats in a debate in Philadelphia last month. It was presented in terms of the other candidates supporting Senator Chris Dodd's position that he would indeed decriminalize marijuana. So the issue is certainly being taken seriously, not just by the candidates, but also by the media, with Tim Russert posing that question in Philly.
Well, I think that's right, and I do think that as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I think that the way Russert asked the question is indicative of how the media views this issue, and the media presents the issue to the candidates, which is a hurdle that we have to overcome. And it's something that I think, in fairness, the media, the mainstream media, ought to change, because instead of asking who supports this policy of decriminalizing marijuana, which really means, as we both know, and as probably most of your listeners know, we're talking about people getting arrested. We're talking about people getting handcuffs put on them for a minor amount of marijuana. I have to believe that part of why we saw some of the responses we did was because of the framing of the question. The question was framed in a negative way, and of course required no explanation on the parts of the candidates. So I have to say I thought that was unfair in the way it was presented. Asking candidates to simply raise their hand to indicate whether or not they disagree with this policy. And I should note, of course, that Senator Dodd and Congressman Kucinich both said that they did agree with this policy of decriminalizing marijuana. But asking the candidates to simply raise their hand and indicate whether or not they approve, well, it really lets them off the hook. It doesn't force them to actually confront the issue in a real way, or to explain why they might believe that people should go to jail for simple amounts of marijuana.
Now, although most of the other candidates simply raised their hand or not to answer that question, John Edwards offered a surprising statement opposing decriminalization. Then Senator Dodd did take a moment to reiterate his viewpoint. He took a strong stand against prohibition in general. Is that surprising to see from a sitting U.S. Senator, Aaron?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think that we're getting to the place now where more and more people are talking about this issue. More and more doctors, more and more professional people who have seen this policy. They've seen the failure of the policy. More people who know that they, at some point in their lives, used marijuana, and it didn't cause them to become schizophrenic, as the government might claim, or it didn't cause them to shoot their best friend in the head, as also the government occasionally claims. They know that this is part of reefer madness, and I think that we're starting to see that trickle up, as it were, to some of the elected officials in our country.
Now, in 2008, there will be some things for voters to decide along with the presidential race. There will be other local and national seats up for a vote, as well as ballot initiatives. So how much could these presidential candidates have to address those local issues to succeed in their White House run?
Well, that's a great question. If I had to guess, I would say that the presidential candidates will be reserved, as they oftentimes are, not just on this issue, but on other issues of local importance. I suspect that the candidates might get asked at certain points about the various ballot referenda or initiatives. But I, from my experience watching candidates, they tend to not like to make anybody mad. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear out of them that they'll leave it to the local people to decide what to do with that. But I do think the fact that these issues will be on the ballot certainly will give them greater cause for considering this issue seriously and making sure that they do have a cogent position about it.
And Aaron, as someone familiar with D.C. politics, what effect does the presidential election have overall? I mean, does it make it easier or harder to interact with elected officials? And does more or less get done during these election seasons?
Well, I can certainly say that from my experience, less work actually gets done when an election is looming. I think that in presidential election years, that's probably even more so the case because the parties are jockeying for position constantly. But even in non-presidential election years, when we have a congressional election, a general election where members of Congress and members of the Senate are up for election, we tend to see that jockeying as well, and not a terrible amount tends to get done in those time periods. But we do expect to see continued progress on the congressional and federal front. I believe very strongly that our next president will be supportive. I'm not saying I know who that is going to be, but I think whoever it is, I think they're going to be a lot better than President Bush is on this issue.
Also, Aaron, it used to be that presidential candidates were asked by reporters if they smoked pot pretty much as a matter of course in the elections, but last time around and this time it seems not to be the case. Instead, the candidates are kind of forthcoming regarding their past in the case of Obama, and then the press is asking more substantial policy questions like decriminalization. That seems to be an interesting shift for marijuana in this political arena lately.
I think you note something interesting here, which I think is indicative of the fact that the issue is being less trivialized now. Because I think a way of trivializing the issue to a certain extent for media, for the larger mainstream media, is to ignore the policy implications, as you say, that are evident to all of us who work on the issues, and instead focus on something that will make a nice soundbite or fit nicely into a 30-second piece on the news, which is simply, did they inhale or not? Well, I think we are starting to move beyond that, and I will say, just in the past days, Senator Obama has been reiterating some of the things he said before about his past drug use. He's been very honest with young people, been very honest with a group of high school students in Iowa recently, and really, that's what's called for if we're going to fix our nation's broken system in this regard. We simply need our public officials to be honest with us about this, and that's what MPP tries to do. We try to make sure that the president, through the Office of National Drug Control Policy, isn't telling our kids outrageous lies, because I have to say, I don't want my children thinking that heroin is about as dangerous as marijuana, which is essentially what the government would have you believe.
Also, Aaron, we really have seen the political relationship between powerful government entities and the medical and scientific community exposed over the last few years. Do you think marijuana has particularly suffered because of this shift with medicine and science?
There is no question in my mind that the Bush administration's war on science, as some like to call it, and I think it's I think that's an appropriate label for it, has caught marijuana up in it, and there is an absolute lack of understanding of the science around medical marijuana, around some of the studies that have been done, and of course, there's this institutional amnesia within the White House itself over the fact that the White House issued a report in 1999 saying some very interesting things about marijuana, including that it had therapeutic uses and that it should be studied more. And of course, the White House today never talks about that study, probably because they didn't like the results of it. It's absolutely this war on medical marijuana, war on marijuana generally, the war on patients, it's all tied up in the Bush administration's war on science, in my opinion. And you see that in other issues as well, such as stem cell research.
So the end of the Bush presidency, that could signal a light at the end of the tunnel for marijuana research by medical and scientific institutions, you think?
Well, it does seem like we're going to be coming out of the dark ages, because it would be hard to imagine an administration worse than this one currently.
Righto. Well, Aaron, this has been a great conversation. It's always great to have you here on the program. Many thanks for joining us again here today.
It's always my pleasure.
Thank you again, Aaron. Aaron Houston is the Director of Government Relations at the Marijuana Policy Project. We have links to them right up on our website today at normalaudiostash.com.
Listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow. The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com. Have you ever wondered what Amsterdam is all about? Don't just read about the culture that has accepted cannabis. Experience it firsthand with CS Travel's Sensible Amsterdam Tour with NORML. Travel to one of Europe's most beautiful cities this January for an educational and recreational visit to a city that regulates cannabis like alcohol. CS Travel has arranged an exclusive visit for reform-minded Americans that includes a private tour of some of Amsterdam's most renowned coffee shops, educational seminars with coffee shop proprietors, local law enforcement, members of the Cannabis Retailers Association, and NORML staff. Entertainment includes a special evening at the Boom Chicago Comedy Club, canal tours, visits to the city's many museums, including the world-famous Van Gogh Museum. Don't just wonder about Amsterdam, experience the beauty and freedom of this unique city firsthand with CS Travel and NORML's Sensible Amsterdam Tour. Pricing information is available online at coffeeshoptravel.com. That's coffeeshoptravel.com. Or call toll-free at 800-816-1846. That's 800-816-1846. Be a sensible American. Visit Amsterdam with CS Travel and NORML this January. Call 1-800-816-1846 right now to book your trip. More information is available at NORML.org.